Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike. Now, as most of you probably know by now, sadly, on November 12th, 2018, Stan Lee sadly passed away at the age of 95. So, in tribute to him, and in tribute to one of the greatest human beings who ever lived, the godfather of comics, if not the comic pop culture in general, whatever you want to call him, here is my personal tribute to Stan Lee, which is his top 20 movie cameos. So without further ado, number 20 is Deadpool. Now, this is a cameo you really don't expect from him, as he is the DJ in a strip club. This is both hilarious and very tongue-in-cheek for Stan Lee to appear in. Even though he didn't particularly like this cameo appearance, it is still one of his most memorable in my opinion, and that's why it's right to kick off this list. My next one at number 19 is Thor the Dark World. Yeah, a bit of a throwaway cameo, considering that the only thing he really does is asks for his shoe back, but even so, it's still pretty funny to include him in this way, in a mental hospital above all places. Next one at number 18 is X-Men Apocalypse, a very poignant cameo as well, as it's one of the only times that he appears with his late wife, Joni, as well. Number 17 is Black Panther. Now, this is a cameo I don't think anyone was really expecting from Stan, and it's one of his more quieter cameos as well, but he really has some important things to say in the particular scene that he is in. At number 16 is Teen Titans Go to the Movies. I mean, Stan Lee in a DC movie? Nuff said. At number 15 is Hulk. Now, while not the greatest comic book movie of all time by any stretch of the imagination, the cameo of both him and Lou Ferrigno walking out of the science building as security guards is very memorable, very funny, and something you, again, don't quite expect. At number 14 is Daredevil, another surprise appearance by Stan Lee where a young Matt Murdock saves him from almost being trampled by a truck as he lifts down the newspaper and looks around. Really good cameo from an otherwise very disappointing movie. At number 12 is Captain America the Winter Soldier. Now, Stan Lee seems to have a thing for cameoing as security guards, but this one is one of his funniest, as he just walks into the building, sees the missing costume and says, "Oh man, I am so fired." And you see that the costume is missing, and it's just one of those hilarious moments of the film that really adds to the film's greatness. At number 11 is Venom. Now, while this is now the last cameo appearance of his in his lifetime, it's a very interesting one, as it's interesting the way he speaks to Eddie Brock and the way Eddie Brock interacts with him, and even though he's looks very old and very frail by this moment, he still manages to add a certain charm to this scene. Okay, that was 20 to 11, so now we kick off the top 10 with probably one of the most meta moments from Stan Lee, where he completely smashes the fourth wall and actually introduces himself as Stan Lee, but isn't believed to be him. So it's definitely one of the funniest and one of the best cameos that Stan Lee ever did. At number 9 is Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, yes, everybody knows my opinion of that movie on this channel, but that doesn't stop this cameo from being one of the funniest ones that he ever did, especially drinking like 100-year-old Asgardian ale and managing to slur his trademark line of Excelsior. At number 8 is Captain America Civil War. I mean, does anything else need to be said about this particular cameo other than, are you Tony Stank? When he's a Federal Express man, and it's definitely, again, another funny but memorable cameo from Stan the Man Lee. At number 7 is Mallrats. Now, while this is not a Marvel movie cameo, it's still a very poignant cameo to look back on now, considering how much of his comic book history that he talks about with the leading character in this movie. And it's interesting the way how he relates it to some of his own personal things in his life. At number 6 is Big Hero 6. Now, this is probably one of my most favourite Stan Lee cameos, even though it's an animated cameo and he actually had nothing to do with creating these characters. The cameo in the post-credit scene, that's what I was trying to say, is one of the most interesting cameos from him, as he appears as one of the characters' dad and introduces the superhero mantra that this particular character decides to take on. Okay, we're getting down to the top 5 now, and at number 5 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, this is, again, another funny cameo from Stan Lee, where his car just shrinks and he makes a really funny, maybe a throwaway line, but nonetheless it's absolutely hilarious when he appears and says this particular line. At number 4 is Thor Ragnarok. Now, probably, again, there's a reason why these cameos from 10 to 1 are listed in a particular order, and this for me is just absolutely hilarious, as he basically appears as Thor's barber and even says his hands aren't as steady as what they used to be, and you see the device he uses and your jaw just literally drops to the floor with this particular cameo. At number 3 is, of course, this cameo had to be on this list somewhere, from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where you actually learn all these cameos have been connected in some way, shape or form, where you see Stan Lee speaking to the Watchers about all the various appearances that he's made throughout the MCU. At number 2 is Spider-Man 3. Now, while not a funny cameo and a bit drawn out compared to some of his other cameos, I think the words that he says particularly here are ones that are going to be remembered forever as the future sadly goes on without him. Enough said. Okay, at number 1 is my personal favourite cameo. While this is in a lot of top 10s, I've never seen it as a number 1 before, but without further ado, my number 1 favourite Stan Lee cameo is The Amazing Spider-Man. I mean, is there anything that just sums up Stan Lee in the space of about 30 seconds to a minute than this particular cameo, where he plays a librarian who is completely oblivious to what's going on behind him before just walking out completely just like not having a clue as what's just happened around him. And for me, that's why I think this particular cameo will stick with me for as long as I live. So that does it. That is my personal top 20 favourite Stan Lee movie cameos. And your list may be different. Feel free to comment below and tell me what your favourite top 20 Stan Lee cameos are. And let's always remember this man for the true genius he was, one of the best humans that ever lived. And I guess that's all that's left to say, besides obviously the usual. Feel free to subscribe if you are new here, and like I said, comment below and tell me what your favourite Stan Lee cameos are. And instead of my usual sign off, I'm simply just going to say, Excelsior, my friends.